Have you ever met someone like this? A man in his 40s, neatly dressed in a suit, with a steady career, seemingly lacking nothing. Yet when handed a cup of coffee that's just a little too hot, his first reaction is, "I'm sorry, I must have troubled you." Or a woman, juggling work and children all day long, but when she admits she feels tired, the first thing she does is give a shy smile and say, "Sorry, I guess I'm just being weak." I've sat silently for hours in conversations like that, listening to people apologize for things that are not wrong at all. Sorry for being hungry. Sorry for crying. Sorry for laughing too loud. Sorry just for being in the room. At first glance, you might think it's politeness or humility. But when apologies become as natural as breathing, when they slip out even before there's a reason, it's no longer just good manners. It's a mark, an old scar that still runs deep. Here's a hard truth to accept. Not everything we call personality is truly who we are. Sometimes, it's survival strategy shaped in childhood. If you find yourself always shrinking, always scanning others' moods, always saying sorry, it may not be your true nature. It could be a reflex, shaped in a home where love wasn't a gift, but a form of currency. In families with narcissistic parents, love isn't a given. It's a scarce resource, handed out in small conditional doses. The child learns early. You're loved only when you meet expectations, only when you make the adults happy. But if you say no, if you show your real emotions, then anger, cold silence, or blame comes crashing down like a storm. That child, maybe you, maybe me, didn't know any other way but to shrink, to let go of their voice, to let go of a self that hadn't even fully formed. They learn to smile when they don't want to apologize when they did nothing wrong, to stay silent even when their heart is aching. Imagine a room full of broken glass. Every step you take must be careful, or you'll get hurt. That's what childhood feels like in a narcissistic home. Always on edge, always alert. Because one small mistake, and you become the target. So the child, naturally, programs their nervous system with a survival machine. They scan the air, catch every subtle shift in tone, every flicker in expression. They become a living emotional radar. It helps them avoid the storm, but it also strips them of a core sense of safety, the sense of being loved unconditionally. Carl Jung once said that every child carries a shadow, the part that's hidden, suppressed. That shadow doesn't disappear. It waits for the moment to return. As adults, we may forget the exact memories, but the shadow of childhood still lingers in the way we love and allow ourselves to be loved. I remember a client once told me, "I don't know why I feel exhausted in every relationship. Loving someone feels like entering a competition, always proving, always explaining. I want love, but when someone is truly gentle with me, I get scared. I keep waiting for the hidden trap." He didn't realize it wasn't weakness. He was simply carrying his childhood map into the adult world. And on that map, love was never safe. Imagine someone who lived through war. When peace comes, even the sound of fireworks makes them drop to the ground, because their body remembers. Their heart remembers. The hardest thing about invisible scars is that you can't see them. There are no bruises, no cuts, just behaviors that seem normal. Apologizing too much, fear of saying no, doubting kindness, exhaustion in love. But all of these are signs of a childhood where safety was missing. And here's the painful twist. The very tools that helped you survive become the chains that hold you back as you grow. Hypervigilance, once your shield against a parent's rage, turns into anxiety in relationships. The habit of apologizing, once a way to ease conflict, now makes you feel small and worthless. I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, do you always feel the need to explain yourself? Do you feel tense even when someone is kind to you? Do you apologize just for breathing too loudly or taking up space in a room? If so, it's possible you're carrying those invisible scars. They don't mean you're broken, but they whisper in your ear, "You're not enough. You should shrink. You must apologize, or you'll lose love." And this is where the healing begins. To recognize that what you thought was your nature is actually the memory of a child who never felt safe. This doesn't mean you're stuck forever. It simply means that healing starts with awareness. I was not born to apologize for existing. I don't need to perform to be loved. I am no longer the child in the room full of broken glass. But to get there, we must first face the patterns etched deep into our hearts, the patterns that shape how we love, how we fear, and how we unconsciously repeat the past. And that is exactly where we'll go next. When you were a child, the world around you felt like a map with no roads. You had no compass, no signposts. The only thing you could rely on were the expressions on your parents' faces to guess whether today would be safe or a storm was coming. A single furrowed brow could make you hold your breath. A sigh could turn you into a frozen statue. From a very young age, your body taught itself to become a radar, constantly scanning for every small shift in the house. And once that radar is programmed, it never shuts off. Many adults carry a constant state of alertness without knowing why. They walk into a crowded room, and their eyes immediately scan the space. Who's smiling? Who looks upset? Who seems distant? Within seconds, they've built an emotional map of the entire room. To others, they may seem observant, sensitive, emotionally aware, but in truth, this isn't a natural gift. It's a survival skill, forged during years when their safety depended entirely on accurately reading other people's moods. A client once told me he felt like a soldier who had never left the battlefield. Even when sitting in a quiet cafe, his mind was scanning for danger. "I know it makes no sense," he sighed, "but I can't stop. I'm always waiting for something bad to happen. Like peace is just a fragile shell hiding an approaching storm." What he didn't realize was that this was the legacy his nervous system carried from childhood. Think of it like a fire alarm. In a house that's caught fire too many times, the alarm keeps going off. It saved your life back then. It was essential. But now that you've moved to a safer house, the alarm still rings. Every day. It reacts to steam from the soup, to mist from the shower. And you end up living in constant anxiety. Not because there's real danger, but because your body no longer knows the difference between safety and threat. In psychology, this is called a permanent survival mode. You grow up, you change environments, but your body doesn't update. It still thinks you're in the old house, where every word and glance could be a blow. And so, you carry this mechanism into love. When your partner takes too long to reply to a message, you don't just think they're busy. Your brain rings the alarm. Something's wrong. They're angry. They'll leave. When someone gently touches your shoulder, instead of peace, you freeze, waiting for the hit hidden behind that touch. There's an image I often use to explain this. Imagine you were given an emotional GPS, but it was calibrated in a war zone. Every sound, every gesture, the GPS screams, "Danger, danger, danger." And now, when you use it to navigate a peaceful city, you keep getting lost. You think love is a battlefield, when in reality, it could be a garden. One woman told me her husband loved her deeply, but she couldn't believe it. Every time he hugged her from behind, her heart raced like she was being trapped. "I know he means well," she cried, "but my body doesn't believe it. I keep waiting for something to change, for some price to be paid." For her, happiness was the most dangerous enemy because it made her drop her guard. And in her inner world, letting down her guard meant disaster. That is the cruelty of invisible scars. They don't just live in your memories, they live in your nervous system. They turn love, a place that should feel safe, into a minefield. You walk across it every day, holding your breath, waiting for the explosion. Jung once said that what is repressed in the dark will control us from the shadows. This survival mode is part of that shadow. You don't want to always be on guard. You long to let go. But the shadow from your childhood holds the reins, pulling you back into the same old script, living as if a storm is coming, even when the sky is clear. I remember the first time I heard a man say, "I wish I could love without being afraid." It may sound strange, but to him, love and fear were two sides of the same coin. He was used to believing that loving someone meant preparing for hurt, reading their moods, bracing for disappointment. For him, love never meant peace. And that is the tragedy for many who carry the legacy of narcissistic families. They don't know how to trust safety because they've never experienced it. The sad truth is, your nervous system doesn't reset just because you grow up. It doesn't magically turn off at 18, or when you get a stable job, or when you enter a healthy relationship. It keeps running in the background, like a hidden program in your computer, draining your energy and making every emotional experience feel heavy. So what can you do? The answer isn't simple, but the first step is to understand this. Your tension is not because you're too sensitive or something's wrong with you. It's because your nervous system was trained to respond this way. It's not your fault. It's proof that you survived. But surviving is not the same as living. Surviving keeps you breathing. Living means something more. To truly live, you need to learn how to rewire your system. You need to teach your body the difference between past and present, between war and peace. That journey won't be easy, but it is possible. And to go further, we'll need to look closely at the specific patterns this survival mode has left behind. They show up in 7 behavior patterns, 7 emotional masks people often wear in love. In the next part, I'll tell you about them. Starting with the seemingly harmless but deeply haunting habit, the urge to always explain your own existence. There are times I ask myself, why is it so hard for so many adults to simply say no? A clear, brief no is a basic human right. Yet for some, no is never just no. It always comes with a long trail of explanations. I'm sorry, but I can't. Because I'm busy. Because I don't want to be a burden. Because I'm not sure I even deserve this. They can't stop at a simple sentence. They feel the need to justify every breath, every need, every choice they make. A man once told me that before sending a simple message like, "I can't make it," he would write it, delete it, rewrite it, adding countless reasons to prove his refusal was reasonable. He didn't know why he did it, only that there was a vague fear in his chest that if he just said no, he would be disliked. In his eyes, a personal boundary wasn't a right. It was a challenge that might invite punishment. This is the first pattern, the urge to always explain. It begins in the years when saying no could trigger a parent's rage. The child learns that their needs are only valid if they come with an apology, wrapped in fear. So they develop a strategy. If I lower myself enough, if I give enough reasons, if I prove I mean no harm, maybe I'll be allowed to exist. This habit becomes so deeply rooted that by adulthood, no is no longer a complete sentence. It's only the beginning of a speech. Imagine a child raising their hand in class to ask to use the bathroom. But instead of saying, "Miss, I need to go," they feel the need to explain, "I drank a lot of water. I've tried to hold it in. I promise I'll be quick. I won't disturb anyone." Even a basic need becomes a negotiation. And in love, this leads to exhaustion. Every boundary turns into a battle. I remember a woman once told me that in her relationship, she felt like a lawyer constantly defending herself. She defended her need to rest. She defended having her own opinions. She even defended feeling sad. And the more she explained, the more tired she felt, the more she believed she was actually at fault. That cycle made her believe love always required justification, never just being. The painful truth is that when you always justify yourself, you're unconsciously sending the message that your boundaries are negotiable, and the people around you learn to question you instead of respecting you. The second pattern may seem more beautiful. It's a kind of near superhuman empathy. These people can walk into a room and instantly sense who's angry, who's sad, who needs a hug. They pick up on subtle shifts in tone, faint frowns, held back sighs. Others often praise them as great listeners, emotionally sensitive. But beneath that gift lies something else, an early warning system programmed for survival in a volatile environment. A child in a narcissistic family quickly learns that their parents' moods determine their safety. If dad's angry, they need to stay away. If mom's sad, they need to cheer her up to avoid blame. So they train themselves to read faces, to tune in to emotional shifts, to become an emotional radar, always alert. A man told me that as a child, he would wake in the middle of the night just to listen for footsteps in the hallway. If the steps were heavy, he knew the next morning would be hard. If they were light, he could relax. That habit ran so deep that even as an adult, he couldn't sleep soundly. A small noise in the house would jolt him awake, heart pounding. In love, this hyperempathy can turn into emotional fatigue. These partners constantly read every gesture, try to prevent conflict before it starts, and adjust themselves to match their partner's moods. It sounds like deep care, but in reality, it's emotional depletion, because they never truly relax. They don't love freely. They love as if balancing on a tightrope. A woman once said something I'll never forget. "I don't love my husband. I manage him." She didn't mean she lacked love. She meant she spent her days guessing how he felt, adjusting to avoid conflict, trying to keep the peace. But the price of that peace was herself. Through the lens of Jung, we can see both these patterns. Always explaining and hyper-attuned empathy stem from the same shadow of childhood. a shadow called fear of abandonment. The child learns that their existence isn't accepted by default, so they shrink, justify, anticipate, just to survive. And even as adults, that shadow walks beside them, urging them to stay alert, to stay small, even when the relationships around them are safe. The pain of these two patterns lies in this. They were once brilliant survival skills, but in love, they become shackles. The person who always explains never has firm boundaries. The one who's always alert can never fully rest in someone's arms, and both fall into a familiar spiral. The more they want to be loved, the more exhausted and disconnected they feel. Here's a truth I want you to hold on to. What you're carrying is not a flaw. It once saved your life. But now, you're no longer the child in the storm-filled room. You can learn to turn the radar down. You can learn to say no without an apology. It will be a long journey, but recognition is the first step toward a new future. And to better understand how invisible scars continue to weave their way into love, we'll now move into the next two patterns. One of them is the most surprising of all, the strange allergy to kindness and tenderness. I once witnessed a very small moment, but it left a deep impression on me. During a counseling session, when I handed a woman a glass of water, her eyes blinked rapidly, her body slightly tensed. Then she gave a strained smile and said, "Thank you, but I don't know how to repay this. It was just a glass of water." A simple gesture, yet for her, kindness came with unease. It was as if a familiar question echoed inside her. What does this person want from me? Is there a price I'll have to pay? This is the third pattern, the allergy to kindness. It sounds paradoxical, but for those who grew up in narcissistic families, tenderness was never just tenderness. A hug might be the opening move in a game of manipulation. A compliment could be the bait for future bargaining. A mom loves you often came with an invisible invoice. You owe me, and you must repay. And the body, wise in its own way, learned to be cautious around any expression of kindness. One man shared that whenever his wife did something thoughtful, cooked his favorite meal, left him a sweet note, instead of feeling warmth, he felt his heart race and his palms sweat. He couldn't enjoy the moment because he was waiting for the blow to follow. For him, love never came free. It always came with an invisible contract, and he hated that feeling, but didn't know how to stop. In truth, this reaction is not about being ungrateful or distrustful. It's the body's memory. The body remembers that in the past, tenderness was never pure. It was the start of a series of demands, expectations, and manipulation. So even when love comes genuinely in adulthood, the nervous system still sets off alarms. Danger. Don't trust. Brace for impact or run. Sadly, this very reaction ends up damaging many beautiful relationships. The partner wonders, why won't they trust me? I'm just trying to love them. While the person carrying the scars thinks, if I trust, I'll be betrayed. If I let go, I'll pay the price. And so, an invisible wall grows between them. If the third pattern turns love into a minefield, the fourth turns life into a stage. I once knew a man who, before every meeting, would spend minutes in front of a mirror practicing different smiles, different nods. He said even when alone, he rehearsed dialogue for every possible situation. He didn't call it acting. He called it preparing. But truly, it was obsession. He always felt he had to play a role. In love, this becomes a tragedy. He had one version for work, one for friends, one for family, and one for his partner. All of these versions revolved around a single question: who do I have to be accepted? When you grow up in a world where your true self is criticized, mocked, or deemed not good enough, you learn to wear masks. A polite mask to avoid scolding, a cheerful mask to please others, a strong mask to earn respect. But along the way, your real face gets forgotten. I remember a woman crying in a therapy session saying, "I don't know who I am. I just know I have to be happy when others are happy, strong when others need it, silent when others are angry. But if you ask me what I really want, I don't know." Her words sounded like the weary sigh of an actor who's been on stage too long. She had memorized every line of every role, but forgotten the sound of her own voice. The heartbreaking truth is that mature love isn't an audition. It doesn't ask you to prove your worth. It simply wants you to show up with your tired days, your moments of weakness, your imperfections. But if you've lived in roles since childhood, the idea that someone could truly love the real you feels both longed for and terrifying. Jung once said the mask, the persona, is something we create to adapt to society. It's necessary. But when you become the mask, you lose your soul. And in love, that means you're never truly loved. The other person only loves the version you perform, and you remain alone, even in their arms. The allergy to kindness and the performance of life, they may sound like two separate things, but they grow from the same root. The fear that your true self is not safe, not enough to be loved. One avoids tenderness, believing it's a trap. The other hides their true self, fearing it will be rejected. And both live in a world where love feels more like a threat than a refuge. I want you to imagine this. You walk into a dark room, lit only by a spotlight. You stand there, wearing a mask, saying lines that aren't yours. The audience applauds. They love the role you play. But deep in your heart, a question echoes. If they saw the real me, would they still clap, or would they walk away? That is the haunting fear of those who've been performing for too long. And now imagine, after years of receiving gifts that came with hidden costs, someone hands you a bouquet of flowers, no strings attached. Instead of joy, your body trembles. You wait for the hand to tighten, for the voice to shift, for the price to appear. This is what happens when love no longer signals safety, but triggers suspicion. But the truth is different. Not all tenderness is a trap. You weren't born to live forever on stage. You have the right to step down, to take off the mask, to be shaky but real. And you have the right to learn how to open your heart to kindness, to slowly teach your body that not every gentle gesture comes with manipulation. Recognizing these two patterns doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means you once had to survive in a world where truth wasn't safe, and now you're carrying that legacy into love. But because of that, you also have the power to relearn, to rewrite the script. And the first step is naming these patterns, facing them head on. In the next part, we'll dive into one of the most common patterns of all, the constant urge to apologize, even when there's nothing to be sorry for. And we'll begin to see how this silent habit leads people into a cycle of love that never feels like enough. There's a scene I've witnessed many times, and every time it catches in my throat. A man, after sharing about an exhausting week at work, suddenly pauses and says, "Sorry, I'm complaining too much." A woman, tears running down her cheeks, quickly wipes them away midway and whispers, "Sorry for bothering you by crying." A young man, smiling proudly while talking about his academic success, immediately lowers his head and says, "Sorry, I shouldn't brag." These apologies don't come from real mistakes. They come from a deep belief that simply existing is a burden. This is the fifth pattern, the silent illness of apologizing. It's not just politeness. It's a scar from childhood. When a child learned that merely having needs or showing emotions could irritate someone, to avoid punishment, the child learned to attach an apology to every action, like a charm for protection. One woman told me that as a child, whenever she said she was hungry, her mother would shake her head and say, "You always want something." When she cried, her father would say, "Stop it, don't bother me." Slowly, she came to the conclusion that her needs were wrong. So, as an adult, every time she sighed or asked for something, the words, "I'm sorry," slipped out as an automatic reflex. But here's the tragedy. The more you apologize, the more you unconsciously teach others that you truly are at fault. When you say sorry for simply existing, the people around you start to believe you're small, that your presence carries no weight. And so the cycle repeats. The more you apologize, the more you're overlooked, the more you feel unworthy. A man once said to me with a sad smile, "I even apologize when it rains," as if the rain was my fault. It sounds absurd, but to him, rain reminded him of the frowning faces from his past, and he felt somehow responsible for things beyond his control. This is how a child ends up carrying the whole sky on their shoulders, just to feel safe in their own home. Then comes another pattern, more painful, more subtle. The strange attraction to people who are not ready to love you. This is the sixth pattern. Many people ask, why do I keep choosing the wrong person? Why do I fall for those who are distant, cold, even cruel, while ignoring those who offer genuine affection? They call themselves foolish or weak. But the truth is more complex. A woman once confessed that she had dated a wonderful man, patient, caring, always present. but she felt bored. There was no spark, no feeling of being in love. Then she met someone distant, someone who rarely texted back, who made her guess his intentions, and suddenly her heart caught fire. "I know he's not good for me," she said, "but I can't resist." What's really going on? The answer lies in a nervous system that was programmed in childhood. For those raised in narcissistic families, love never came easy. It was tied to effort, longing, and the need to prove oneself. So in adulthood, the brain only recognizes love when anxiety is present. A love that is peaceful and complete gets translated as boring or fake. Meanwhile, a love that is cold and hard to read feels familiar because it matches the old language. Love must be earned, fought for, chased after. A man once admitted that when his girlfriend expressed her love openly, he felt confused and doubtful. But when she pulled away and went cold, he felt his heart race, like he was finally feeling real love. In truth, it wasn't love. It was the fear of abandonment, a feeling deeply rooted in childhood. And for him, familiarity meant reality. Maybe you've experienced this too. Ignoring the one who stays, chasing the one who walks away, pushing aside the hand that always reaches out, running after the hand that always pulls back. You call it passion, but in truth, it's just your past replaying itself. The child within you is still trying to win the old game, to finally make the cold one love you, to prove that this time you are enough. From Jung's perspective, this is unconscious repetition, the shadow of childhood stepping into the present. A child who was never loved unconditionally doesn't know how to recognize unconditional love, even when it's right in front of them. They mistake safety for boredom and anxiety for passion. And so the cycle continues, choosing those who are unavailable, then suffering, then repeating. There's an image I often share. For those carrying these scars, love is like a well. They're used to drinking one drop at a time, waiting, longing. When someone comes offering a flowing stream, they can't believe it's real. They look at the water and think, this isn't love. Love is never this easy. And so, they turn away, back to the old well, even though it leaves them parched. The truth is, no one was born to keep apologizing for their existence. No one was born to only love those who never fully show up. But to change, you must first recognize. Every time you say, "I'm sorry," for something harmless, that's not humility. It's an echo from childhood. And every time you feel drawn to someone distant, that's not true love. It's an old memory pulling you back. You're not broken. You're just used to it. And sometimes, familiarity is more dangerous than pain. But once you see the cycle clearly, you can begin to choose differently. You can start by pausing before saying sorry when there's nothing to apologize for. You can stay with someone who truly loves you, even if at first it feels strange, unfamiliar. And little by little, your nervous system will begin to learn a new language of love, one rooted in safety and presence. But there's still one last pattern, perhaps the most paradoxical of all, the fear that you might become the very person who once hurt you. In the next part, we'll step into that territory, where fear becomes both a chain and a beautiful proof that you are, in fact, not them. A man once sat in front of me, his hands clenched tightly, eyes filled with confusion. He said, "What I fear most isn't being abandoned. What I fear most is becoming my father." He shared that every time he got angry, even if his voice rose just slightly, he would immediately see flashes of his narcissistic father in his own reflection, the very man who had frightened him throughout his childhood. In those moments, he would panic, punish himself with hours of silence, or apologize over and over. This is the seventh pattern, the fear of becoming the one who once hurt you. For those raised in narcissistic families, the memory of a parent isn't just about outbursts of anger. It's a haunting shadow that follows them well into adulthood. They live with the constant fear that one day they might repeat the same story. They avoid anything that might make them stand out. They turn down praise, reject opportunities to shine, because being seen feels too close to being arrogant. They shrink themselves, not because they lack talent, but because they fear that rising too high might turn them into the oppressor. A woman once told me, "I hate when someone calls me strong. Immediately I hear my mother's voice. You're so full of yourself. You only care about you." And instead of feeling proud, I feel guilty. A compliment, which should be a gift, becomes a trigger. And so she retreats, avoids recognition, just to keep that fear at bay. The irony is, those who are haunted by the question, "Am I becoming narcissistic?" are rarely narcissists. Real narcissists don't lose sleep over hurting others. They don't question whether they're being too self-important. The very presence of that fear is proof of empathy, of awareness, of a deep desire not to repeat harm. But when this fear grows too large, it becomes a new prison. People begin to live in their own shadow, afraid to step into the light. They turn down career paths, pull away from relationships, close themselves off, just to make sure they never become them. And, in doing so, they miss out on the chance to live fully, to love deeply, to shine in their own authentic way. Now that we've walked through all 7 patterns, one truth becomes clear. None of these are flaws. They're not disorders that prove you're broken. On the contrary, they are brilliant survival strategies. Every habit, from constant explaining to hyper-empathy, rejection of kindness, playing roles, endless apologizing, loving the wrong people, and fearing your own reflection, was once a shield. Each one helped you navigate a childhood where love wasn't safe, where being yourself meant risking everything. Picture a child growing up in a storm-filled house. They learn to explain, to avoid punishment. They learn to scan moods, to avoid the next blow. They learn to doubt gentleness because a hug might hide a knife. They wear masks because their real face was mocked. They apologize because their presence was seen as a burden. They chase after the cold, believing love must be earned. And they fear their own strength, just to avoid repeating the pain. Every skill made perfect sense in that context. But when you grow up, when the storm is past, those skills don't just disappear. They become background programs, silently shaping how you love, how you react, how you see the world. What once saved you now keeps you stuck. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." These patterns are the unconscious. If you don't see them, you'll believe this is just who you are, that love is supposed to be anxious, that your worth requires apology. But the moment you name them, you step out of that cycle. Naming them won't erase the scars overnight, but it's like seeing the map for the first time. Before, you kept walking in circles, thinking potholes and broken roads were all that existed. Now you know there are other paths. They're unfamiliar. They're harder at first, but they hold a new possibility. The chance to live without constant alertness, to love without always performing, to exist without saying sorry for breathing. I remember one especially powerful moment with a client. He had lived through all 7 patterns. On the final day of therapy, he sat quietly for a long time, then said, "I used to think I was broken, but now I understand. This was just how I survived. I did everything I could to make it through. And maybe now I can learn a new way to live." That is the power of recognition. It's not meant to shame you. It's meant to honor the child who fought to survive. It's meant to show you that what once saved you is no longer needed. And it's meant to give you back the right to choose, to live, not just survive. We've walked through 7 mirrors, 7 reflections of a childhood shaped by narcissism. Each one shows us a piece of the story, the fear, the adaptation, the wounds. But the picture is still incomplete. There's one final piece, perhaps the most important of all. How can these pieces lead us to a love that's mature, a love no longer bound by old scars? And that is where we'll go next, into a place where love is no longer a battlefield, but a safe ground. A place where you can show up fully, without apology, without performance, without having to prove anything at all. If you've journeyed with me this far, perhaps there's a heavy question sitting in your heart. So what now? Am I doomed to carry these scars forever? The answer is no. These patterns are not your destiny. They are simply old programs, and like any program, they can be rewritten. Not easily, not quickly, but absolutely. Healing doesn't happen in a single moment where you wake up and feel clean from the past. Healing is a series of small, repeated choices, day after day. It's like teaching your body and soul a new language, the language of safety, of presence, of real love. Imagine you've lived your whole life in a dark house, moving only by feeling your way through the shadows. You know every crack in the floor, every creak of every door. That's what familiarity looks like. Then one day, you step into a new home, flooded with light. It confuses you. Everything feels unfamiliar. You don't know where to place your feet. But if you're patient, if you stay, slowly your eyes will adjust. And you'll realize that in this new home, you can walk freely, without fear. That is healing. Learning to stay in the light, even when it blinds you at first. There are many ways to begin. One is to pause before saying sorry out of habit. When you feel the urge to apologize for being hungry, try something different. I need something to eat. The first time might leave your heart racing, your mouth dry. But over time, you'll discover this truth. You don't have to apologize for having needs. Another way is to learn to receive kindness without running from it. When someone reaches out to hug you, instead of tensing up, try taking a deep breath. Stay in that moment. You'll start to see, not every hug is a trap. In love, when you feel drawn to someone distant, pause and ask yourself, is this love or just a familiar fear? Then try, just once, to choose the one who stays. Even if their calm feels bland at first, peace isn't boring. Peace is simply a language your heart has not yet learned. Healing also means taking off the mask. You don't need to act strong when you're tired. You don't need to smile when you feel sad. You can say, I'm not okay today. And if someone truly loves you, they'll stay. Mature love doesn't run from gray days. It doesn't need you to shine all the time. It just needs you truly present. Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Healing is not about denying the dark. It's about turning to face it and saying, I see you. I understand why you're here. But now, I choose something different. And slowly, those small choices begin to rewrite your story. When you stop over-explaining, you affirm that your boundaries matter. When you lower the emotional radar, you give yourself permission to rest. When you accept tenderness, you teach your body that love can be safe. When you take off the mask, you open the door to real closeness. When you stop apologizing for existing, you remind yourself that your presence is a gift. When you choose someone who shows up over someone who pulls away, you step out of the past. And when you stop fearing you'll become them, you allow yourself to shine, completely different from the shadow that once haunted you. Mature love is not something you have to earn. It's not a reward for perfect healing. Mature love can arrive right now, while you're still trembling, still scarred. It's the kind of love that sees you on your worst days and stays. The kind that doesn't ask for explanations, or for you to shrink or hide. It is a love that accepts you, shadow and light together. You deserve that kind of love. You deserve to take up space in this world without apology. You deserve to say no without justification. You deserve to remove the mask and show your real face. You deserve to enter a relationship where peace is not boredom, but the soil where love can truly grow. But to recognize that love, you must begin with yourself. You cannot believe others will love you if you don't believe you are worthy. You cannot receive from others what you are unwilling to give yourself. That means this: you must learn to treat yourself with the same tenderness you give others. You must learn to protect yourself the way you once tried to protect everyone else. You must learn to look in the mirror and whisper, I am worthy, even if I'm not perfect, even if I'm still healing. This is not a one-time lesson. It's a lifelong journey. There will be days you stumble, days when the darkness speaks louder, days when you fall back into old habits, but none of that erases your progress. Every time you notice and choose differently, even just a little, you are rewriting the story. Remember this: you are not that child anymore. You are no longer trapped in a room full of broken glass. You don't need a radar that never sleeps. You don't need to apologize as a shield. You don't have to prove your worth. You are already enough, right here, right now. And out there, a love is waiting for you. A mature love, an unconditional love, not a contract, not a battle, but a home, a safe home. When you learn to love yourself with patience and gentleness, you open the door for that love to enter. It may come from another person. It may come from the quiet presence within you. But one thing is certain: it exists, and it is meant for you. This journey will not promise perfection, but it will promise truth. And the truth is, you are not broken. You are not too late. You are not beyond hope. You are someone who survived. And now, you have the chance to truly live. Not just survive in the shadow of old wounds, but step into the light of the love you've always deserved. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.